Hello friends and welcome to the Weekend Catch-Up Club, the coffee morning show brought to you live every Saturday direct to Twitch and available later on demand at youtube.com/gamertagged and podcast services. Grab some snacks, grab a drink and hang out with us for the next hour or so because I am joined by a very special guest. It is from Game If You Are, the indie marketing PR agency, Taya Beleanina. How are you?
I am very well. Thank you so much for having me.
I think I mispronounced your surname as I was just doing the intro there. But I was front of mind. I think I just fluffed that, but I was too busy doing the intro. I thought I'm gonna mess it up, and I think I messed it up. But never mind. Hopefully it's okay.
It's all good. It's all good.
So Taya, we are wrapping up E3. How has it been for you this year?
Gosh, do you know what? For me, it has been super, super exciting just because it was actually my birthday on Sunday. So
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I got lots of special surprises just for myself in terms of things that I wasn't expecting, things that I was looking forward to. So it was a really nice kind of birthday treat for myself. And we did have a couple of games showcased as well, both in the Wholesome Games Showcase and the PC Showcase, which was really, really exciting because I'm quite new to the industry. I only joined last year. So it was the first time I've actually seen something that I know quite well and I worked on out there being enjoyed by so many different people. And the response has just been amazing. So honestly, I couldn't have gone better, to be honest.
Fantastic. There's so many games that got shown off from loads of different, ranges of the spectrum, from like the huge mega budget AAA games right down to games that I had never heard of, from super small single developers right through to super small teams. And honestly, it's just like the variety and creativity is so magic to see them all getting like the spotlight shown on them to get this. I mean, I can only imagine as a developer that's worked on those, or somebody who's worked on the marketing of these games, to see it on the big stage like that, it must be an incredible experience.
It really is, honestly, and it's just one of those things that I didn't know how it would feel until I was there and I was watching the showcase, and I was thinking like, wow, I actually wrote the press release for this game. Like, I actually helped it get this far and helped it kind of get the response that it got. And the great thing is all the games that we have worked on that have been showcased, they're really great games. So, it's just wonderful to see so many different, such a variety of different games, and being able to say, great, now we don't have to keep the secret anymore. We can actually talk about it. We can see how everyone's responding. And I know that those, the games that we have worked on, but also loads of games that I've just been keeping my eye on because I'm obviously a game fan. And I have quite an interest in indie games through my job, but also personally. So being able to kind of see all those developers, all those studios succeed in such a big way has been just really exciting, I think, as someone involved in the indie game sphere.
Yeah, just a little bit of fun before we go into the meat and potatoes of the podcast, and of course your background and everything. What were the ones in particular that you saw that you were just, this looks so good, I can't wait to get to try this out? Was there anyone or multiples that jumped out at you?
I think there's a couple of kind of standouts for me personally. I think the first one is, even though it's not an indie, I think completely shocked me and made me quite emotional as well because I wasn't expecting it, is Outer Worlds 2. Just because I love Obsidian, I love the first game, and I honestly just wasn't expecting it in any way, shape or form. So it was quite funny actually, because I was watching the showcase with my partner, and the trailer started going, and it's a really funny trailer. It's got such great writing. It's really amusing. It's got this kind of like self-aware thing going for it. And in the back of my head, I was kind of thinking, oh, this kind of feels like the humor that they have in the Outer Worlds. I wonder if they're kind of like trying to copy their thing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the very end where I saw the silhouette of obviously the character that looks very similar to the first game.
Yeah.
And the music kicked in, and I was just there kind of like, wow, this is actually happening. So
Yeah.
that was like kind of super standout. In terms of other games, mostly it was honestly indies that stood out the most to me. I'm really excited about Planet of Lana because I came
Yes.
across it a while ago,
Yes.
when they
Yeah.
weren't really quite out there as much and they didn't have as many followers. But I saw one day these screenshots of these beautiful scenes that are almost kind of like watercolor painted. And I really like kind of sci-fi, but like
Hmm.
different kinds of sci-fi. So when I saw these screenshots, they were very much, they had these alien kind of landscapes, but something's quite different and quite interesting. And I was so pleased for them to be shown in the showcase, especially given that um, how small I think they are.
Yeah.
I don't know if they are small. I apologize if they watch this and they're just like, actually, we have a huge team. But it looks really, really special. There's loads of, I think basically every game in the Wholesome Showcase, I
Yeah.
have my eye on pretty much. Very much my kind of type of game with that. Gosh, I'm trying to remember. I like my Steam wish list, I think, has grown about 200 since
Yeah.
the
It's like
beginning of E3.
add to list, add to list, add to list. Yeah,
Every
everything.
time I'm just when I watch them, I just have it open next to me, just like, oh, that looks interesting. I'm going to add that. I think there was one. There was one that was, I think it's called Silt. I want to say that I want to. I'm pretty sure it's called Silt. It
Right.
was kind of like a black and white indie.
Oh, okay. I think I roughly know what one you're talking about. And if I'm not mistaken, that's actually coming. There's a demo coming to Xbox soon, and it's coming out on Game Pass as well. It's
Very
yeah,
exciting.
it looked super interesting as well. But yeah, you're right. There was so many amazing little indie games, and
Mm,
Planet of Lana was one of my big ones where I saw it immediately. I saw it animating, and I immediately fell in love with it. And I think it's for
mm,
probably the same reasons that you were mentioning there. It's got something that's a bit flashback about it from the 90s era of when animation was really just hand drawn and rotoscope animation, and
mm.
it's got that science fiction but real world kind of alien world feel to it as well, and it just looks so good, and I can't wait to just see that game and get it in my hands. And there was actually a couple of really interesting art directed
Mm.
animated indie games. Sable is really jumping out at me as well because for that one, for different reasons, it felt like French 90s sci-fi or something. It was something like the visual look of it, the art direction of it just looked so good and so interesting. And we're so lucky as gamers. There's so much stuff coming. It's just wild. I can't wrap my hand around it, and I'm weeping into my calendar to say, okay, I have no time to play any of these. My backlog of shame is just, I was like, forget it, Ross. You're never going to get to anywhere near any of these games. So
No, tell me about it. I mean, there's been so many indies that have come out in the last 2 weeks that I've bought and I'm ready to play them. But I'm still playing Mass Effect Legendary Edition, even though I've
good
played Mass
choice.
Effect like 300 times.
Yeah. I know. That's the thing. It's like I've got that. I'm working my way through Mass Effect 2 at the moment, which is one of my all-time favorite games. I think that series was my most loved series on the Xbox 360
Mm.
generation because of the storytelling and characters and just how it was BioWare at its peak. It really did feel like that. But then we've got so many amazing games that are now getting boosted from performance upgrades or patches for the new consoles, and I just want to dive back in and play all these really old games because they now look and run incredibly well. And I think, but there's new games coming out. When am I ever going to get to play these new games? It's an embarrassment of riches, and it's a good problem to have. But I do wonder. It's like, okay, I don't know. I'm gonna have to pick one and try and work my way through it and just chip off the little bits of ice from that iceberg, knowing full well that it's just going to freeze over again and it's going to get even bigger, twice the size before I know it. It's
Yep.
what a challenge. Why do we have to work, Taya? Why do we have to
I
work?
know. Well, so we can buy the games that we will never play.
I know. I know. So, speaking of work, please give yourself the full introduction as to your role at Game If You Are.
Yeah, so I joined the game if you are about September of last year. First as a marketing coordinator, so really kind of looking after the organization of the company, kind of helping with almost like a production role, I guess. Although I wouldn't call myself a producer. And then later on, I took on the role of client strategy manager. So basically, my role involves kind of taking on new clients who need a bit more of kind of the strategic approach before they go into their marketing or PR campaigns. So really, I'm working with sometimes games that are nowhere ready to be announced or to even be shown to anyone, just to kind of discuss what needs to be done before they can get to that stage.
Mm.
Sometimes I work with games which are ready to go, but they need a little bit of a plan in terms of what PR they want to do and what kind of strategic messaging they're going to go for. So yeah, it's quite varied, and I find it really enjoyable because I get to work with so many all different games all the time, and I feel like I get to input a lot of change into the process that they're going to, and being able to kind of give my expertise where it's needed to help them succeed as much as they can, because the indie space it's tough.
Yeah.
It's a tough place to be, and I mean games in general is also a tough place to be, but especially for those developers who are potentially solo or in small teams, who are just starting out, who are making their first game, it can be a very daunting place to be when it
Mm.
comes to they've finished their game, they've got everything ready, but they're not really sure what to do next.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, what I do in a nutshell.
So how difficult a process is it then if a small indie development team have sunk all of their resources, their time, more than not their savings and everything as well, into developing their passion project, and they want to bring it to market? So how challenging a process is that to even begin to wrap their head around, oh crap, how we now need to market this thing. We now need to bring it to an audience, whether it is self-publishing directly on Steam or on the console platforms, or whether or not it is a boxed version, a boxed copy to get it on the shelves. Can you talk a little bit about that process at all?
Yeah, so in terms of, obviously every game is very different, so there's certain things that will be different across any kind of marketing campaign that you do. But I think generally, within this industry, there's particular channels that are most commonly utilized, and a lot of the strategic work that I do specifically is fairly formulaic. It's about, I guess, the challenge lies in the very early stages of figuring out what the game really is and how you can talk to people about it. So I think those kind of early stages where I get involved are really key. And of course, I would say that because that's what I do. But
Absolutely.
once you get that first kind of initial strategy and that initial kind of positioning and what's the word for it? I guess audience positioning
Mm,
in place, all the other stuff is basically about kind of time and money. The size of kind of the PR campaign that you can do will really depend on how much time you have or what budget you have to potentially work with a partner. Being able to create, eye-catching marketing assets again is all about, how much time do you have to capture all of that stuff in house, or do you have the budget to be able to hire someone professional to do it, etc. So I think that the main challenge, especially in the indie space, is about being able to help your game stand out in the market. And it is quite a challenge because there's so many amazing indie games coming out all the time, and there are, for every kind of indie game that we see succeed, there are hundreds and hundreds which have never really seen the light of day, that have been released but through one reason or another just haven't caught the attention of players or press or Steam's algorithm or something
mm,
like that. And I guess my job, and kind of the job of any marketing professional in this industry, is about helping that game overcome that first hurdle.
Yeah.
So that all the other steps that come up with things like PR or working with influencers or doing ads or anything like that, so that all of those work in tandem and they are actually impactful. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, it did. It did. I'm just wondering if, because you mentioned obviously, budgets are obviously hugely important. Sometimes you have very little to work with, so you got to be, a little bit scrappy, a little bit guerrilla, with what you can kind of do with different assets, and because you never know what is going to necessarily go viral, and something going viral is like the ultimate goal for any kind of advertising or marketing, but you never know what is going to just resonate with an audience to make it, rush across the internet and everybody's liking it, everybody's sharing it and retweeting it. What for you has been maybe the kind of the most challenging, but also maybe the most creative thing that you've had to do because of the restrictions of, we don't have a mega budget, so we can't do a big ad campaign. We can't do big billboard campaigns or underground station signage and like the full marketing blitz is what you normally think of, like posters and everything everywhere. But you've had to be like really clever, but like such low budget, maybe a bit more experimental because of you don't have the Times Square billboards that you could just put the next Borderlands game up or something like that. I'm just curious to see like what is the most kind of creative thing that you've maybe had the opportunity to get your hands on.
That is a really good question. I think from my experience in terms of strategy, so this hasn't actually happened yet. So I can't give too much detail away.
NDAs,
but
folks,
this is
NDAs. For all our listeners, sign the NDA. You can't share it or talk about
it. It's something that I quite enjoyed is a recent strategy that I did working on, I think I can say, a music-related game. And the fun thing with that one was thinking about how can we get this in front of kind of the wider than the game players, the people who are actually going to be playing this game, and getting it in front of actually the music industry and getting word sent out that way, and kind of trying to figure out what steps to take in order to get basically big musicians to take notice of what is possible within this game and how it kind of works. So to be honest, I think that's so far has been kind of the most fun, the most creative thing I've done, because it really takes you out of that fairly typical, fairly normal kind of indie game marketing campaign, which are normally very kind of similar, because just that's how the industry works. Press expects things in a certain way, influencers work in a certain way. So when the budget is low with a client, often we will just have kind of a fairly typical approach to get them the best results they can for their money. But with that one, it was just very interesting thinking about, this is bigger than just the gaming industry, and this has a lot of potential of getting kind of picked up by people just completely outside of even both industries, as just something that's really cool and something that's doing something a little bit different. And I think that was the most fun, that kind of the most creative thing that we did with that, because nowadays so much of marketing is moving away from traditional the billboards, things like that, and really relying a lot more on just just average people being able to kind of move it along. So community building, super important, working with influencers and things like that can bring you some of the most interesting kind of campaigns, and often also give you the best results as well. So I would say that was probably one of the interesting ones. But again, that kind of approach will still take the developers a lot of time and kind of effort to kind of organize that as well. So there's always a balance there between, the dream that we have for the final launch and kind of what is possible within a certain time frame, which I'm sure, anyone working in indies would tell you, because all the kind of milestones and the timelines are just a little bit shorter than AAA's. You can't you can't announce a game in 2012 and then release it in 2020. No one's going to remember if you're a tiny little indie.
Well, maybe if you're Duke Nukem Forever, you could probably do that, but or maybe Half-Life 3, but that's probably about
probably
it.
kind of like a 1 in a million approach. I would love to see that, to be honest, because that would be very interesting to look at.
I know. It's so interesting and fascinating, video games PR, because one of my next questions was going to be about video. Obviously, what is video games PR and why is it so important? Which you've kind of already answered as well. But it's a side of the business where I don't think, or I don't really see many people really talking about it or highlighting it, or even that aware on a consumer level, certainly, that it is even a thing or really exists. Because when we think about games, we think about the big platform holders doing the advertising, and it might get advertised on like the store pages, the digital storefronts and things like that, or they just magically appear in the store shelves as these box things, whether it's your local game or your HMV, rest in peace for the ones that are maybe not still open anymore. But there's so many great PR agencies out there that are doing tremendous work because of the sheer volume of developers and games. And we don't really hear much about a lot of them. So that's why I really like what Game If You are doing as well. And I've got friends that work out a couple of others as well. And just to be able to talk about and explain about what game PR is, because it's so broad, it's so varied. You mentioned it is like from the actual strategy phase right through to getting the game actually published or on the shelves or whatever the release actually looks like. It is, there's so many moving parts to not just making a game, but getting a game actually out into the hands or into the disk drives or into the controllers of consumers. It's wild.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, again, as my job title will say, PR is so super important. So I think you're very right in saying, it encapsulates so many different things, so many different approaches. But I think for me, the basics of PR is just taking a product and putting it in front of as many eyes as possible. That's kind of the way that I look at it. And more traditionally, that has been, in front of press. So, published in magazines, things like that. And obviously, as the industry is moving along, more so on things like websites and blogs and things like that, but also very much looking at other avenues like influencers and content creators within that kind of framework. So the way we kind of approach it is we think about, what's going to be the most appropriate to every single game, because some games lend themselves very well to kind of traditional PR with outlets and press, places like PC Gamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, all of those big names. But sometimes you might get a game that actually you think, do you know what, maybe we should focus on influencers more so than anything else, because we think that's where kind of the success lies. And I'm a very strong proponent in marketing in general, but PR very much as well, because I think sometimes there's a little bit of a running joke among kind of game marketers that people come up to them when they talk about PR and marketing, and they say, well, when I make a game, I'm just going to make a game so good enough that it's not going to need any marketing.
Right. Wow.
And I think, honestly, I've heard multiple people say they've had people say that to them, which I find quite shocking, to be honest, but also not surprising anyway, because there is a bit of a misunderstanding, I think, especially among players, but sometimes also among developers, that if the game is super super good, it's just going to go viral on its own, and it's kind of going to get out there and do really well and things like that. And it has happened. It has happened in the past that a game might go super viral for one reason or another without a concerted effort to get it out there. But if you take 1 in 10 years and compare it to how many new games come out on Steam every day, it's a very difficult thing to kind of recreate. And the more games that kind of come out, the harder it just becomes, because everything's pretty much been done. And every so often you'll get a game which does something completely brand new. And I think those are the ones that usually go viral because it's something that people are very excited about. But if you have a good game that you've made, that you're really taking care of, that you really want to put out there in the world, if you don't make an effort to get people to look at it, it's very likely that it's just going to get lost in the piles and piles and piles of games that are coming out on Steam every day.
Yeah.
Because we're not just, a lot of our job is about getting the game seen by players, of course, but parts of it are definitely about how to optimize platforms' view of the game as well, because that visibility sometimes is one of the most important things. So it's about thinking, okay, well, what can we do externally to help Steam's algorithm recognize our game as being something that people are interested in? What can we do to get featured on can't think of storefronts now on the Xbox store. What kind of deal can we do with this to get it seen by this group, etc. So I think it's very important, and I think most people do understand that. But there is a little bit of, I guess, the misconception, and I think it's because, to be honest, all of us PR people are so busy doing the PR. Maybe we don't talk about it enough.
Possibly, it's the same with any marketing team, because you're too busy. You're so busy promoting and doing marketing campaigns for other people, you don't market yourself, and it does feel a little bit like that. But that's actually a really interesting line of discussion which you mentioned there about like the things that you can do, because you can't trust anything to just go viral on itself. And games that are a prime example of that came out recently, I would probably say something like Among Us or Fall Guys, two very, very different ones. Like Among Us hit Steam like a year before. It came out in 2019. And it took a whole year later for anybody to really notice that game. And then it blew up. And then it came over to the consoles, and now on Switch, and I think now on Xbox, or very soon on Xbox. But then Fall Guys launched and blew up mostly because it was free on PlayStation Plus that month. And all of a sudden you've got 90 million people, or I don't know what the install base is of the PS4 at the time, but like 100 million people that all have access to the game. So they're going to be, well, it's not costing me anything, let's just play it. And all of a sudden you've got an example of a great game. It's immensely fun, but had that been a full price, budget price, paid for entry into playing it, would it have sold at all, kind of thing? Would it have sold, 10,000, 100,000, 100 copies, worst case scenario? But all of a sudden, because nobody has to shell out any kind of money, they can just try it, and then it blows up over the course of the summer last year when everybody was stir crazy. It was tapping into the zeitgeist at the time of everybody's feelings. It's like, okay, we've had our Animal Crossing, which is the tranquil island getaway. Then Fall Guys lands, and as everybody's ready to just go manic because we've been in our house for way too long, for months, so we're ready to just go nuts. And then it just landed at just the right time, and it was a PlayStation Plus game, and all of a sudden it erupts and it's immensely successful. So that line of marketing deals and stuff must, like, to hit it at the right time as well, must be so crucial and so rare to just get it at the right time for it to blow up like that.
I think it's really interesting that those are two examples that you have pulled up, because I've actually done quite a lot of reading around both of those games because I was so interested in kind of their marketing approaches. And I think this kind of goes alongside, I guess, my point about kind of that virality and how that comes along, because actually I know for a fact that the Fall Guys kind of rise to popularity was very heavily driven by their marketing strategy, which is really, obviously it's not something that anyone can really see, but because I know people who work at Mediatonic, and also I've heard both Oliver, who kind of is head of community there, and Haley, who's think head of communications, I want to say. I'm not sure her exact role. Heard them talking about it is actually quite interestingly, their approach to their marketing of Fall Guys was super planned to look like it was unplanned.
Yeah. That's the irony, right? It makes something look like you're not even trying, but actually behind the scenes, holy shit, there's a lot of stuff going on.
And I think that is it's a really difficult thing to pull off. And I think they did it amazingly. But I think it's really interesting because a lot of the time people will kind of come and say, and they'll say, oh yeah, that was just like a viral game. It just went viral because it was something X or Y or Z. But actually the way they develop their community, the way they engage with their community, the way they've timed everything, all of that would have been planned, months in advance. And they would have had very, very particular kind of milestones and messaging things and things like that, which I think is super interesting because at the time I was the same. I was like, wow, this is such a great game. It's really interesting how it just kind of came out of nowhere and now everyone's talking about it and they're doing really funny things on Twitter. So, they must have like a community manager who's really funny.
Yeah.
And then looking a bit more into it and kind of seeing like, okay, wow, that whole persona of that community was planned. It's not something that's, you don't just put someone on there and just tell them to be themselves and kind of expect great things. Some people can do that.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, when you're working on kind of a bigger game and things like that, it is about thinking, okay, well, how are we going to successfully communicate with our audience, and how are we going to get them to care about our game? And I think there was something that I saw, and I can't remember where it was, about I think it was like a little bit of a slideshow that someone at the Fall Guys team kind of talked about on Twitter, where they had a specific slide of exactly what kind of feelings they wanted their audience to feel in their community, and it was very much about this whole approach of these like silly little beans who are like a little bit wholesome and they're a little bit funny, and there's nothing like dark or serious or anything else about it. All of that was planned in advance. It wasn't just like an organic thing. And I think that's one thing that I see time and time again, where a lot of the time, sometimes developers and players might say, oh, that game went viral just because, Undertale went viral because it's just a good game, or Stardew Valley just went viral because of this and that. But actually, when you dig into it, there's a lot of thought, a lot of strategy behind it. And every so often you will get just like a gem where someone is just super talented and they can make a game that does break those genre norms or is doing something so special that it does kind of maybe have a little bit more of a chance to be kind of organically picked up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just find it all super interesting because there's so many different people doing such interesting things out there in the industry, in the space. And with Among Us, that's a slightly different but also interesting story because I don't know if you know a lot about how their kind of resurgence happened. But they basically got picked up by a really popular Twitch streamer. And that's how they went viral. And that was completely by chance. It's not something that, yeah, honestly, there's a really great article that I think that the people who run Innersloth wrote about how literally they basically kind of gave up on the game because no one was really playing it. They were kind of trying to do other things. And this super popular person just played it on one day, and suddenly they were getting hundreds of thousands of players.
Goodness.
Overwhelming their servers, and they were just kind of like, we're not really sure what's happened. We're not really sure what to do. But even then, I think that could have been just like kind of one-off. And it could have just been like, oh, hey, everyone's playing Among Us, and now it's kind of died out again because people aren't playing anymore. Mm-hmm. Actually, what they did, which was super strategic about kind of their marketing, their development, is they didn't just say, okay, we're gonna let this one pass us. They thought, actually, let's really make this something that players want to stick around for.
Yeah.
And a lot of their approach, I think, especially more recently, since Victoria Tran joined their team, because she's like one of the most kind of famous community manager people. I'm a huge fan because she is excellent. She is really excellent at what she does. With her help and kind of help from other avenues, they really seized on that virality and they kept it going. And the fact that we're still talking about Among Us, that it's still getting, they had a big trailer, it's E3, they've got
Yeah.
kind of all this stuff happening, is a
Well,
real testament to them.
won the BAFTA and everything last year as well. For can you imagine how the developers must have felt when it's been out a year and it hasn't really done anything. Nobody's really playing it. Nobody's really talking about it. They must be thinking, "Oh shit! I have to box up my desk. I have to get a real job now." And then all of a sudden, it just blows up, and it's been a roller coaster for them, like a tidal wave of Among Us memes and everything ever since.
Yeah.
And even now, there's like the Ratchet and Clank tie-in for the different skins in the game, and it's wild how that can happen at any given point within social media, and one influencer just kind of picked it up and started playing it, and then it kicked it all off again. It's scary, but also fascinating as well.
Super fascinating. I think that's why I kind of love my job, because it is sometimes unpredictable and it's changing all the time. 5 years ago, that might not have happened. Whereas in 5 years from now, we might be looking at like a completely normal thing that's then, but we wouldn't have even imagined of how that game kind of comes out and how it's being represented and things like that, which I think is really interesting. And yeah, sorry, I kind of went a bit off tangent, but those two games are super interesting with their marketing strategy.
They're a good case study for sure to just look at and kind of analyze what they've done, because Fall Guys did blow up, and then the social teams started having a lot of fun with it, and then there's that whole bidding war which came off the back of it, because corporations were wanting to get their logos on the little jelly bean people, and then they're like, no, we could have just taken the money and made like a ton of money by having AT&T or various brands like in the game, but they decided to, which is incredible as well, I don't think I've ever seen this, to open up to charitable donations. And then it became like the ninja skin siding up with, was it Mr. Beast or something like that at the time? And then
something like that,
and then they end up raising like over $1 million for charity. And so like the fact that they decided to not take any corporate money to just get skins in the game and threw it out to charity, all of a sudden the goodwill from consumers is priceless, like totally priceless. And then it kept the conversation of Fall Guys for another several months whilst this thing was not just going on, but like the rollout of it. And then everybody wanted to get the special skin in the game by when, I can't remember how you even got it, if it was by X number of crowns or something. But again, that whole strategy must have just been, it feels like it was just reactive, like off the cuff. It's like, let's just kind of do this, and then something happens and then they're reacting to it. That's what it felt like. But as you said, it was probably planned. They probably had like a big discussion as to say, guys, we're getting offers, like silly offers, to put company logos in the game. And they must have workshopped that for a while to say, okay, no, we're gonna do this instead. And this is what we're hoping is going to happen. And this is how we're going to ride this wave of what could happen off the back of this. Mental.
It is. And it's so interesting. And again, I don't have eyes in their team or anything like that. But I think, it would have been something that they would have obviously kind of put a lot of thought in. But part of it is very reactive, because, they wouldn't have known like 6 months in advance that would have been possible. So, part of it is reactive, part of it is strategic. I guess for us, the work is kind of trying to balance those out and not be too kind of tied to a plan, but also not to be completely ad hoc with everything, because I think that would be difficult in a different way.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, it's just come to mind just now. In Game of UR's kind of role in PR and marketing, do you find that things like staples, like the Google ads, like ads on Facebook because they know the types of things that you're interested in, do those kind of things still work? Because they feel, maybe not the Facebook side of it, but like Google ads popping up on various websites, it still feels like a very like old archaic form of advertising. And I see it, we all see it for everything. If I was looking for a new microphone a few weeks ago, and now I'm getting bombarded with microphone ads like everywhere, and I never click on them because usually I know what I want to. I usually search for things anyway.
Mhm.
But I'm just curious if that kind of stuff still actually works, or is there a place for that? But maybe it's more just awareness rather than getting people to actually click on them now. Like, how does that factor into things nowadays?
So it's a super interesting question. And luckily for me, I actually came into this industry from digital marketing. So
Hey,
I know lots and lots about ads, and it's quite I wouldn't say a passion of mine because that sounds really boring. But it's definitely an expertise kind of set of mine. And I think as with any marketing, I guess, it really depends on what you're trying to do and what your goals are. I would say generally in my experience, Google ads don't aren't usually we don't use them for indie games just because they rely on keywords, and usually kind of because we work with smaller kind of games and teams, most people wouldn't be searching for them on Google because they don't know about them because they're kind of still at the start of their advertising.
yeah,
In terms of Facebook ads, that's something that we use quite a lot for lots of different reasons. Sometimes for awareness building, sometimes for conversion building. It can be a useful tool kind of in your toolbox. But I think with ads specifically, usually it's in addition to kind of like a bigger piece of work, like a PR campaign or something like that. Just because if you're just using ads, I think you would be spending a lot of money to try and get as many kind of as much return as you would probably get with the same money and time if you do something
mm,
else. So it really depends on the game. It really depends on kind of your goals. I think Facebook is something that you use more often just because of the kind of parameters that they have that we can target. So, we can be really specific about, okay, well, we want people who play shooter games and have a VR headset. We want to target them. And Facebook lets us, which is a little bit kind of more strategic than trying to kind of rely on different targeting methods. So I think
yeah.
it definitely has its place.
That's super
Um,
granular as well to be that specific, which can be effective, but also kind of like really scary as to the information that they have
it is
on everybody.
really scary, and sometimes it doesn't make sense because sometimes they'll have like an interest group which is super specific, and you think, why would they even have this? But then other times they won't have like a really basic one, and you think, surely there are people who like this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I can't think of any examples on the top of my head, but there was one that I was putting together not too long ago, and there was like such a basic one that I couldn't find. Something as basic as like puzzle games. Like I just couldn't find it in the targeting because I didn't have it. But
Wow.
if I wanted people who are interested in, I don't know, open world survival craft sandbox games, that's probably on there. And I don't really know how they make that decision, to be honest. But yeah, definitely, I think as part of an overall strategy, they always have a place. Things like ads, things like kind of more traditional advertising. I will admit I don't have a lot of experience with traditional advertising, so like kind of physical published things
Yeah.
because my background's more in digital. And from what I understand, it's quite expensive. So a lot of the time, the smaller indie devs just can't kind of have the budget for that. But yeah, digital advertising definitely useful.
Totally, and it seems to be for the last number of years anyway. That's where all of the focus tends to go, because we're all online all the time. We're always either doom scrolling as we go for a restroom break or something, or we're at our computers, or we're on our tablets, or like we always have like a device on us. So it makes sense that, you know, for better or worse, it does make sense that the majority of strategies and funding goes towards the digital side of it. It just kind of makes sense, because I started in print design and campaigns and advertising, but now much more the last number of years, last kind of 10 years, digital experiences for corporate design, B2B, the side of stuff. And for me, it's so exciting for like what new technologies are constantly coming out and what you can do in the digital space, because the rules are always changing. It feels a lot like the Wild West a lot of the time. It's like somebody's just doing this thing. It goes against every parameter or guidelines or rule set that you thought you knew, and then somebody's just done something completely random, and then you're like, oh, okay, so maybe you can just like do something really crazy, and that's the beauty of it. Is if something doesn't work, you can easily change it. It's not as like the old adage, if it's in print, it must be true kind of thing. Like it's locked in, it's locked down, you can't change it. But having said that, I love to see really effective and cool, like environmental advertising, stuff that's really clever. So, but again, that costs like a lot more money a lot of the times, because you're hiring out a space, or there might be a licensing issue if you're putting something in the middle of Trafalgar Square or something like that, or Times Square or somewhere. But
Gosh,
again, the impact of maybe getting that space might be worth it. You just don't know, or it could be, well, we just wasted $1 million for one day in Times Square. That didn't work, but you know, it's just it's so interesting and exciting to see what's going to work and what can be done because of all of these digital tools and digital platforms which we can utilize now. It's like TikTok. I mean, TikTok I still don't understand. I've been asking people about it for so long. It's like I kind of see more and more companies doing like the Instagram stories and like TikTok little viral videos, and of course the influencer stuff is huge on TikTok as well. So you can see it obviously working, but for somebody who has maybe been in the marketing space for the past kind of 15 years or so, it must be terrifying for them to thinking, oh God, I need to get up to speed with all of this. Is it a young person's game anymore? It must be kind of interesting, but also exciting and a little bit terrifying to say, oh my God, like my 2-year-old knows how to use TikTok and I don't know how to use TikTok, that kind of thing. It must be.
No, definitely. And I mean, I've tried TikTok. I can't quite get my head around it. But it's something that we, you know, as an industry are starting to use a lot more for games. I think it's still early days for games, but obviously so many different industries have had so many successes. You know, the beauty industry is huge on TikTok. You have like even I've seen like TikToks where I'm like, oh, maybe I need to buy that mascara. Like that looks really good. And there's like a certain approach to that, which is that there's something about this kind of really short, really succinct kind of messages. And it's not easy making TikTok content. It's something that I wouldn't know where to start with because
Yeah.
it's not very funny. And also, you know, there's a certain art to it where it's kind of you get kind of I don't even know how to explain it. You kind of like put these characters across and you have this kind of approach to it that I just find so fascinating. But you know, people are starting to do that, and there are influencers on TikTok who are gaming influencers. Sometimes I look at them; they've got like 2-3 million followers, and they just post clips of them playing like Beat Saber over and over and over again, and people love it. It's just something. There's something psychological about it, I'm sure, about kind of these little dopamine hits where people are just kind of watching these tiny videos and being like, "Oh yeah, I got another dose." But but yeah, it's always moving so much, and I think things are a little bit, I guess, what's the word? I think most people in the industry kind of are getting used to it. But I definitely know from my experience in other sectors, sometimes it can be really difficult trying to get kind of, I don't want to say old fashioned industries, but kind of industries where things have been done the same for
Yeah.
years and years to kind of start looking at these other approaches. And it's gonna cost them in the end because the world is kind of moving on and things
Yeah.
are so different now. I mean, I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues this morning who's just joined us, Adam, who had recently done his master's on how gaming influencers kind of work, how they build their communities and things like that. And some of the research that he was sharing that is quite recent is just super interesting because there's kind of there's almost this kind of parasocial relationship that people develop with
Mm.
influencers that never existed before.
Yeah.
Normally you would say, "Oh yeah, my friend told me about this game and they said it's good, so I'm going to play it." Whereas now there's almost this kind of thing where like, "Oh yeah, this person that I watch with millions of followers who doesn't know me, he told me it's good, so therefore I know it's good and I'm going to play it." And
Yeah.
it's honestly super, super interesting, but also can be super effective because it
Yeah.
kind of fills that void of, I don't want to say people who don't have friends because that's not what I mean, but it kind of goes on top of those kind of word of mouth and things like that, which is
Yeah.
still a very super important part of marketing. It's something that's very difficult to organize.
Yeah.
Um, but there are ways that we kind of improve the chances that it will happen organically
Yeah.
through things like it.
Yeah. So what does PR look like in a pandemic? Like how has it been for the past little while under lockdown, and what is it going to be looking like going forward?
So yeah, I think that's the question on everyone's lips. I mean, I joined the industry kind of in the middle of the pandemic, I guess. So some of those early stages I wasn't privy to, but I think with the pandemic, what's been quite clear is the gaming industry in some ways has really flourished because people are at home. They don't really have places to go. Not so much now, obviously, that the lockdowns are over and things like that, but during that kind of really heavy period, more and more and more people would turn to games as their comfort, as
Yeah.
their kind of entertainment and things like that. So actually, in some ways, I think it was probably kind of an easier job for some developers probably to be able to say, hey, here's our game. We know you're bored. Go have a play at it. But I know for a fact that the kind of the other side of that is trying to be just very mindful in the way that we market during a time like that because it's very difficult for it was very difficult for lots of people during that time. I mean, I personally was on furlough for quite a long time, and I filled my time with playing games. That's kind of what I
Yeah.
did because I had nothing else to do. But at the same time, people are struggling with their mental health. People are losing their jobs. They're losing their loved ones, and it's a terrible time. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes we just have to be very, very mindful about how we talk to those people about things like buying a game
Yeah.
or giving money to a Kickstarter or any number of those things, and trying to be just really understanding and really transparent about what we're doing and why and how we're all in this together. So I think
Yeah.
those two sides, I think, of the industry have been quite interesting to see. And I think pretty much everyone has kind of followed in the same thing where, we all know that it's kind of sucky and it's been
Yeah.
really difficult for all of us. But what brings us together is kind of our love of games and our love of being able to see them and talk about them and try new things, um, which is really exciting. And I think, well, I hope that kind of mindfulness carries on even after things get better. I mean, When that will be, I don't know, because, things are kind of getting better here, but I know they're not in other places in the world. So, we're always kind of battling this. Is it over? Is it not over? Is it
Yeah.
getting worse? Is it getting better? But I think that consideration for people's livelihoods and people's kind of emotional state, it'd be good for marketing to always keep those in mind, because that kind of stuff, happens all the time. And being able to, have a human connection through the way that you're talking to people, I think sometimes that's the most successful marketing that you can do. Because what I find personally as a gamer is, if, I look for games that make me want to feel things, whether
Yeah.
they're sad or happy or, not frustrated if I'm playing an FPS, something that really kind of makes you feel human and alive and kind of like you're really living your life. I guess, which sounds a little bit sad because all I do is play games and that's my life. Um, but kind of keeping that in mind as we go forward and trying to be just mindful that, we just want to, everyone just wants to have a good time.
Yeah. It's the power of games and what they can mean to so many people and what we can get from them and how beneficial they can be for your mental health. And we obviously mentioned a little bit there about being mindful of, people's financial status during this time as well. And I find what has been so incredible with Microsoft's messaging this past kind of year is Game Pass, and how amazing that has been, especially during the pandemic, because it is a fairly low subscription based service, and how they're just kind of dominating that space with the marketing, with the PR spin on the Netflix model, to say you can have all of these games for I think it's £10 a month, or if we round up for the whole year, for £100 and odd for the whole year, you will be getting every single game we ever put on our platform, as well as whatever games that we strike deals with other publishers. Hundreds of games, hundreds and hundreds of games for hardly anything. And then you look at other platforms which are charging £60 to £70 per game, and all of a sudden they're winning a messaging battle for how people are feeling right now. Because if they're super stressed about trying to find a job, or if they are on furlough, but they have enough for, say, £10 per month as a subscription, they don't have to give up gaming. They don't lose a connection to something that they love, or a way to communicate with their friends if they can't go out and they can't meet up with their friends, but they can be transported to a whole other world with their friends. And it's just fascinating to see how the pandemic has actually almost bolstered Game Pass as a marketing message. It's weird the way the world works and the way campaigns can hit it at just the right time. Going back to obviously what we mentioned with previous games and the way marketing has landed at just the right time, it's like for things like that, it's hugely important, and it's just amazing to see. And we mentioned it on previous episodes as well, is like what Game Pass means to not just publishers or developers, but to consumers as well, and how it can open up a whole new avenue of content that they would normally never experience or even try out, because they would have to buy the game to find out if they're going to enjoy it or not. And I think a lot of the stats that Microsoft were pushing out a few months ago were like, it is proving that it works, because we have the data that more people are playing more things and more types of things that they would normally never touch. And that's so cool. It's so cool to see that.
It really is. And I think it, like you say, it shows a little bit of a move away from kind of traditional, the way that the traditional kind of, I guess, pricing structure works. Because I saw something recently as well, I can't remember where it was, about Epic Games, the Epic Games Store, and how, they have very often, they give away free games or they give away vouchers and things like that. And actually, there was a graph that showed, how much it cost Epic to put that game free,
right?
Which is a lot. I mean, we're talking
money,
millions. but then how many new players that brought into the ecosystem. And I think that's super,
Fascinating.
super interesting.
Yeah.
Where there's obviously a financial reason why they're doing this, because they wouldn't otherwise. At the end of the day, Microsoft, Epic, they're all companies that need to make money. But the fact that they're willing to try something a little bit different, and they're willing to kind of set these foundations for future retention, I think it's such a great thing to see, because I'm always a strong proponent of things like demos and things like that, because when you're asking someone to spend £70 on a product that potentially they might be done with in 20, 30 hours,
Yeah.
I don't think that's wrong in itself, because I think lots of people worked really hard to bring that to market.
Sure. Yeah. You don't want to
But being able
diminish
to,
people's time and talent. Exactly. Yeah.
of course, but being able to kind of try it and see if it's something that you actually will enjoy, I think that's always such a good thing. So I'm always, it's always great when we can involve demos and vertical slices and things like that as part of the marketing, because a lot of the time that's going to be your strongest weapon, being able to get people in the game by making them have fun in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
So just to wrap up, because this has been already, we've been talking for over an hour already. So
Gosh.
I know, right? That's a good sign that there's been a very, very quick hour. So just to quickly wrap up, tell us, give us the full promo speech about Game If You Are, where to get in touch, and any advice for maybe people looking to maybe get started or transitioning into the industry, if you can.
Yeah, so Game of Your is a PR and marketing full service firm who work primarily with solo developers, kind of small studios and micro publishers. So we're really, we've got our expertise in supporting kind of the smaller size game makers of all sorts of types. And yeah, we have lots of really experienced people on our team of all different disciplines, which means that we can basically help you in multiple different ways to get games into the market and in front of as many people as possible. So I guess to get in touch, the best place would probably be our website, which is gameifyouare.co.uk, I want to say. That would be really embarrassing if I don't know it. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
We'll get the proper links in the description. Don't worry, just in case it's a mistake.
I think that might be best. But oh no, it's .com. Whoops, that's going to be embarrassing when my team sees it. But to kind of learn more about what we do, our team, and kind of the games that we've worked on and things like that. And I think my advice for people getting into the industry is, being able to show your love of games, I think, is always super important, because and I don't think everyone that works in the games industry has to be like a super gamer.
Sure.
But I think it definitely helps to get your foot in the door, to be able to show your passions and to be able to show kind of your strengths and things like that. But balanced with your expertise, because I think, just liking games, unfortunately, doesn't mean you're going to be good at marketing them.
Oh, why not? Come on.
Sadly, lots of people do think that. But I just want to say, if you're interested in going into game marketing or another kind of game discipline, and you're a big fan of games, but you've never done anything in that field before, I would do a lot of research and try and get any kind of experience that you can. Because it's unfortunately very difficult to get in with just passion alone, because there are millions of people who enjoy games. So, you kind of need something to stand out. And, there's lots of really cool initiatives in the industry as well to get more people into the industry. So there's places like Into Games, there's specific kind of, what they called, initiatives, I guess,
Yeah.
that help marginalized developers that help particular kind of subsets of society to get into games.
Initiatives
kind of focus on
like Limit Break as well, where
Limit Break. I'm actually a mentee in Limit Break, so I should have remembered that in my head. But lots of really cool things, and I mean, feel free to reach out to me if you want, because I'm sure I can find some way to help. But yeah, I guess that's my spiel. I'm not very good at marketing myself, to be honest.
I know. Who can market the marketers? That's the big question. So, ladies and gentlemen, massive thank you for your time today watching this episode of the Weekend Catch-Up Club podcast, and of course for Taya for giving us her time, for chilling out today, telling us such valuable insights into PR marketing, who Game If You are as a company, and just great background and insights into the gaming culture, the gaming space, in terms of marketing, in terms of trends, in terms of influencer marketing. Super fascinating, and I hope everybody watching and listening got as much from this episode as I did listening to Taya. It's been absolutely wonderful. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So guys, if you've enjoyed this show, do remember to give a like and a follow. Help us support the channel so we can get more amazing guests on. Until now, take care, and I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.